History hasn't exactly been very kind to Antonio Salieri. From the years immediately following Mozart's death, Salieri had been plagued by accusations of murder, forced to tirelessly defend himself against these hurtful claims that lingered in the air even after his own death. In modern times, dramatic adaptations, such as Peter Schaffer's Amadeus, portray him as a perceived mediocrity, consumed by a seething and penetrating jealousy towards Mozart's unparalleled talents. However, upon closer scrutiny of the historical context and primary sources, one might be surprised to realize that if indeed jealousy existed between Mozart and Salieri, it likely wasn't on the account of the latter. Contrary to popular belief, Antonio Salieri was not the patron saint of mediocrity. In fact, he was an incredibly successful composer in his time. Born in Legnago, Italy, in 1750, Salieri enjoyed a relatively seamless ascent to the top of the musical food chain. As a child, he received his first musical instruction from his older brother, Francesco. After losing both of his parents in his early teens, Salieri wound up in the care of an aristocratic family friend who arranged for the boy to take lessons with the assistant Kapellmeister of San Marco. Soon, he became acquainted with the leading Italian opera composer, Florian Gassman, who then took young Salieri under his wing. This well-connected mentor brought the boy with him to Vienna, where he was introduced to notables such as Pietro Metastasio, Christoph Willibald Gluck, and most importantly, Emperor Joseph II. The emperor took an immediate liking to Salieri and provided him with ample opportunities to hone his craft and advance his career. When Florian Gassman died in 1774, leaving the position of imperial chamber composer vacant, the emperor immediately appointed Salieri to fill the position of his late mentor. He held that position until 1788, when, upon the resignation of Giuseppe Bonno, he ascended to the rank of Imperial Kapellmeister, the highest position within the imperial musical hierarchy, and the position he would hold until 1824, the year before his death. In contrast with the smooth sailing of Salieri's musical career, Mozart's trajectory wasn't nearly as effortless. Despite his early fame as a traveling wunderkind, meticulously managed by his father Leopold, Mozart appeared to have had tremendous difficulty in translating that early success into the lucrative permanent position he had naturally anticipated. Time after time, he was tantalized by the prospect of a coveted position, only to be led on by the perpetual reply of, "I'll let you know in due time." Little did he know that the favoritism he'd received during his childhood had essentially run its course. The members of the nobility who once indulged the cute little prodigy now regarded him as a traveling beggar. Furthermore, the many older, more established composers who once marveled at his youthful brilliance weren't exactly too keen on accepting the grown-up Mozart into their fold. Knowing full well the value of his music, Mozart naturally began to question the reason for his apparent stagnation.
"I'm slowly getting tired of this joke,"
he wrote to his father, who was equally baffled by the lack of progress. Soon, his confusion turned to frustration, and it wasn't long before Mozart began to harbor suspicions that an outside source was to blame for his stagnation. When Mozart made the permanent move to Vienna in 1781, he was well aware of Salieri's standing in the Viennese musical hierarchy. Actually, he might have even possessed a degree of favor towards his contemporaries' music, at least enough to have utilized one of his themes in his own compositions. However, it would take a bit of time for Mozart to realize the true degree of influence that Salieri held, made manifest by the favorable relationship he held with the emperor. In a poignant letter to his father, Mozart lamented the loss of a profitable teaching opportunity, writing,
"As to the Princess of Württemberg, and my hopes to be appointed as her teacher, well, that's all decided now. The Emperor killed it for me, for the only one who counts in his eyes is Salieri."
It's likely that this particular incident was the spark that triggered Mozart's initial feelings of resentment towards Salieri. Here, he was faced with the realization that Salieri's close association with the emperor might have actually hindered his own employment prospects. Through no fault of his own, aside from the crime of being the emperor's favorite, Antonio Salieri unintentionally became the occupant of a troubling space in Mozart's thoughts, unfairly painted as a potential adversary. Fortunately, as the years went on, Mozart slowly began to gain the respect and recognition he rightfully deserved. However, as his star continued to rise, his adversaries seemed to multiply in tandem. Operating behind the scenes were hordes of opponents intent on knocking him down a few pegs. Leopold Mozart, in a letter to his daughter, detailed the presence of a tremendously strong clique against him. Subsequent events would validate his claims. In 1782, Mozart premiered his brand new opera, The Abduction from the Seraglio, in Vienna's Burgtheater, to a packed house. Despite the overall success of the performances, Mozart encountered blatant opposition during what should have been a triumphant time. Unfortunately for him, among those present at the premiere were individuals intent on doing whatever they could to sabotage the performance. Mozart reported the irritating event to his father.
Can you imagine that yesterday there was an even stronger cabal against it than on the first night? Throughout the first act, people were hissing.
Mozart would have hardly been the only victim of these acts of sabotage. In 18th century Vienna, cabals of saboteurs were simply a part of public life. These organized groups of men were available for hire and would willingly carry out any dirty work, in this case, the sabotage of a rival's performance. But who exactly was the one who sent them? Was it Salieri? Mozart's growing suspicions had already cast a shadow on his perception of the man, and the bitter taste of the previously lost teaching opportunity had left an indelible mark. Furthermore, Mozart's inner conflict may have been further compounded by his apparent mixed feelings towards Italians in general. In a letter to his father, Mozart candidly mused,
You know, these Italian gentlemen, they are very nice to your face. Enough, we know all about them.
This hint of prejudice, whether founded or not, underscored Mozart's complicated feelings towards Italians, including Antonio Salieri, an Italian composer who had risen to the top of the Viennese musical scene. Mozart's suspicions might have already extended to Salieri, and his bitterness over the lost teaching position would have only fanned the flames of his growing distrust. Curiously, these initial suspicions didn't even spare the Italian librettist Lorenzo da Ponte, who would later become Mozart's greatest collaborator. In that same letter, Mozart continued,
And if da Ponte is in league with Salieri, then I'll never get a text from him.
Mozart's ambivalence towards Italians in general was so pronounced that he even cast a weary eye towards Da Ponte, a future partner with whom he would create some of his most enduring works. This palpable distrust highlighted the depth of Mozart's apprehension. He believed that if Salieri was involved in any way, even a collaboration with Da Ponte could be at risk. And perhaps he wasn't altogether wrong to harbor these suspicions. In another instance that deepened Mozart's doubts, Salieri seemed to have played a more intricate role in hindering his efforts.
Now, I must tell you of one of Salieri's tricks.
Mozart wrote to his father. In this letter, he recounted how Salieri had apparently played a cunning ruse on the tenor Adamberger, one of the artists for whom Mozart had composed a tailor-made aria. Salieri's supposed manipulation revolved around court management's presumed disapproval of Adamberger inserting this piece into a performance of Pasquale Anfosi's Il Curioso Indiscreto. Although the insertion of arias into another's opera was common practice for the time, Salieri, acting as intermediary, successfully convinced Adamberger to abandon the idea, claiming that court management wouldn't approve of it. As it turned out, management said nothing of the sort. Salieri had made the whole thing up on his own. This incident revealed a more intricate level of orchestration, deepening the suspicion in Mozart's mind about Salieri's capacity to meddle in his affairs, extending beyond mere musical rivalry. But if indeed Salieri set out to sabotage the efforts of his fellow composer, what motive would he have had? During this time, Salieri was, in fact, the more successful opera composer of the two, and by a wide margin. No Mozart opera had achieved the level of success and high esteem that Salieri's operas had. Moreover, Salieri was a brilliant composer in his own right, with an impressive portfolio of operas that had garnered significant acclaim. While the emperor himself was reported to have voiced his opinion of too many notes in Mozart's operas, a sentiment echoed by many of his contemporaries, Salieri, on the other hand, composed the emperor's favorite opera, and the public also held his work in high regard. Salieri's musical prowess and his close ties with the imperial court only solidified his position in the Viennese musical scene. Furthermore, Salieri operated in a higher social sphere and was much better connected than Mozart. With his influential patrons and relationships with the nobility, he had no real reason to view Mozart as a direct threat to be sabotaged. Despite Mozart's persistent suspicion towards Salieri, there are many other accounts that paint a more nuanced picture. Salieri's reputation as a respected teacher, his reported friendly interactions with Mozart, and their shared appearances on operatic bills suggest a more complex relationship. Reports indicate that Salieri's goodwill might have extended beyond mere gestures. He loaned Mozart scores from the Imperial Library on several occasions, attended and genuinely praised performances of Mozart's works, and may have even visited the younger composer before his untimely death at age 35. These reports hint at a dimension beyond the image of a bitter adversary actively seeking to sabotage his colleague. One noteworthy event was Salieri's attendance at a performance of The Magic Flute, a work close to Mozart's heart. In a letter to his wife Constanza, Mozart wrote,
Salieri listened and watched with great attention, and from the overture all the way through the final chorus, there was not a single number that did not elicit from him a bravo or bello.
This friendly interaction contradicts the notion of an unrelenting rival, showcasing instead an engagement that suggests camaraderie rather than animosity. Such a dichotomy raises a fundamental question. If Salieri truly harbored malicious intent, why would he engage in these seemingly supportive behaviors? Why would Mozart collaborate with someone he believed to be his enemy, sharing the stage in joint performances and finding common ground in their shared profession? Why would Salieri willingly conduct the works of his supposed rival? Could there have been ulterior motives at play? If so, what were they? Perhaps Mozart's beliefs about potential sabotage might have simply been a product of his own frustration and the search for someone to blame for his professional challenges. Seeing as how Salieri occupied a prominent position within the Viennese musical hierarchy, he became an easy target for such suspicions. While competition and rivalry were undoubtedly present, the idea of orchestrated sabotage might have been a convenient explanation for Mozart's struggles to secure the positions and recognition he had expected. Finally, in an ironic twist, it was Antonio Salieri who took on the role of teacher for Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart Jr., Mozart's youngest son. This detail, often overshadowed by the enigma of rivalry, underscores a complex relationship between the two composers. Reports suggest that Salieri treated the young Mozart with kindness and provided him with a stellar musical education. As for the sinister notion that Salieri had a part to play in Mozart's untimely death, surely such a widespread rumor would not have evaded the ears of Mozart's widow, Constanza. If indeed this rumor held any weight, the very idea that Constanza, a woman undoubtedly privy to the shadowy whispers surrounding her husband's passing, would willingly entrust her young son's musical education to the man supposedly responsible for her husband's demise is puzzling to say the least. In unraveling the layers of history, one can see that the story of Mozart and Salieri is far from black and white. Their relationship, marked by both collaboration and competition, intrigue and camaraderie, defies easy categorization. Yet, even with the puzzle pieces uncovered over the centuries, their bond remains an enigma, a testament to the intricate interplay of genius, rivalry, and human connection.